For our last project, we're going to be working on the magazines that we created in the magazine cover project. But now we're going to turn our attention to the interior of the magazine, where we're going to create the layout for an article. We're going to be creating two different spreads for this assignment. And when I say the term spreads, I'm talking about two pages grouped together. So anytime you're working with a printed piece that is bound, you're going to have what's called facing pages, which is the back of the previous page and the front of the next page sort of grouped together. And this is how the pages are viewed. So you want to think about your layout in terms of spanning across both pages in what's called the spread. So one spread is actually two pages. So since we're designing two spreads, we're going to be designing 4 total pages. We're going to do the introduction spread, which is what we're looking at here. It's basically the introduction to the article, where we're going to have some sort of image that's going to pull us into the article, the title, and then also things like the byline, which is who wrote it, and we might also need some sort of photo credit or other credit for the article. And then sometimes in the intro spread, there's also the start of the article itself, but that's not always the case. Sometimes magazines like to dedicate an entire spread just to the title. So up to you whether you want to start with the text or whether you want to bring the text into the second page. And then the second spread that we're going to work on is the interior of the article, which is where all the text is located. And the trick to this page is to, of course, display the text in a readable fashion. The whole point of the article is that you can read it, but it's really important that you break up the text. So no one wants to just see this huge wall of text on a page. It's really intimidating. It's not engaging. People would rather see the text come into chunks rather than this huge amount of text all at once. So things like subheads, in this case, the article is sort of a question answer. So you can see they've developed a secondary style for the questions, and that's helping break up the text into readable chunks. They're also using a pull quote. Pull quote is part of the article that gets kind of pulled out and featured in a larger format. And again, this helps pull us into this text, but it also breaks things up so that it's not just continuous text. And then we're also using an image in the interior spread, which again is helping balance the text and add some visuals and support to what we're looking at. So all those things are really important to pull us in and keep us engaged. We also have the folio, which is the page number area. You can see it's more than just the page number. They've included a bunch of different running copy that's helping us navigate through the magazine. So we have the page number, we have the name of the magazine, we have the issue number, and then we have some other information here that I can't quite make out. But you can see that there's a lot of different information. And on the left side, they have kind of the tagline to the magazine, and then the right side, some more different information. So it doesn't always have to be the same information on the left and the right. But that little folio area will not only be really important and useful to your readers, but it helps add a lot of style to your magazine as well. One thing to note is that there's probably more pages to this article than just the one interior spread. Most magazine articles go on for many pages. So when you find your article text, don't worry if you can't fit it all on your interior spread. Just pretend that there are more pages that come after this. You don't have to get it to all fit on one page. In fact, it's kind of nice if it doesn't end on the first page, so we can pretend that there are pages that come after. So we're just going to design the first spread for this particular article. Don't worry if it doesn't all fit. Here's a great example of an article introduction spread. And I love how this is designed because it's really pulling us into the article. And that's what the article introduction is all about. And a lot of times this happens best when there's some sort of relationship between the image and the text. This is from a magazine for bicycling, and clearly it's talking about, getting lost. We have this image of a suburban neighborhood shot from an aerial perspective, and there's a certain regularness to this that it does feel like we're kind of getting lost in the mix. But then the type itself also feels a little bit lost because it's really spread out. The letter spacing or tracking is really extreme. The leading is very extreme. So it's almost getting lost in the white space, and we have some sort of different alignment here that's creating some interesting rhythm to the title of the article. Then in between the lines of the article, they've put sort of this subtitle. Okay, this is helping us give a little bit more information, because "let's get lost" is almost not enough to really tell us what the article's about. That subtitle is just giving us that little bit more. And then the byline in between the last two words. So really great design here. And again, it's about that relationship between "let's get lost" and the image that is pulling us into this. Here's one that's all about text. Okay, so the type is sort of acting as the image here. And there's some really clever typesetting where the T is sort of curving into the P, and then the P is kind of locked into the I and the N. So there's a lot of movement and rhythm to this typesetting. And then there's some images as well. This is a scientific article. You can see that there's kind of this blood plasma or some kind of interesting scientific image that is engaging us. Then again, some kind of subtitle. This is giving us a bit more information. And then the byline as well. And you can see that they have a really simple folio area with the name of the magazine and the page number. Here's one that's a little bit more plain, and it's because it's from a news magazine. A lot of times news magazines are a little bit more straightforward with their design. So we've got an image, we've got the title of the article, a little bit of an intro copy. And this is a good thing to do, is instead of going right from the title to the small copy, go from a title to an intro copy, or sometimes even a few different sizes of intro copy, to just give the article an intermediate step, almost like the cliff notes or the summary at the beginning to kind of pull us into reading the entire article. Then they've also included this timeline of the event. So it's another thing that you could consider doing, is putting some sort of infographic or sidebar into your article. This can either come on the feature start like they've done here, or in the interior spread, you could have some sort of sidebar for some extra information. Another great article introduction spread here, this time with a more minimalistic approach. The photo is doing a lot of the work, but it's a really interesting photo. We have this shot of urban decay. This is from a travel magazine. There's a little bit of a caption that's helping to describe what we're seeing in the photo. And then over in the other side, on the facing page, we have an all black flood that's helping offset that stark image. And then there's been a lot of care that goes into the way this is typeset. A lot of movement to this. And you can see there's little details, like for instance, the way that "loss" in Los Angeles is kind of tucking into the descender on the P. That's helping it all fit together. The byline is also incorporated into that title size. It's a little bit of a darker gray so that it fades away a little bit into the background, but you can see that it's there in that same size, and then there's a little bit of a label to help identify that as a byline. So a more minimalistic approach, but definitely very effective as well. Here's a great interior spread. Okay, so again, we're breaking up the text with some sort of number. Not sure what this number is because I haven't read the article, but I love the way that that is helping to sort of occupy a column along with this sort of pull quote to break up the text. You can imagine that if all four of these columns were filled with text, it wouldn't be as engaging, because I would turn to this page and I would be a little bit intimidated that I was going to have to read a ton of words. But just those little touches, occupying that column, we've broken it up, and now we have a little bit of, kind of breathing space and a little rest for our eye, which is helping us get a little bit more engaged with what's going on here. And we have a great image, and I love how the subject of the image is sort of looking towards the article. If you can, that's often a really good way to, orient your image. Whereas if the image was on this side and the text was on this side of the page, then he would be looking away, which is not as engaging. So just a little trick there. This is actually a article introduction, and taking a little bit more of a grungy approach. There's some deconstructed and sort of defaced elements where there's some like handwriting written over the title. Part of the title is kind of cut off and it's repeated. There's a piece of red tape over this sort of repeat of the title. So definitely a different style to this. The images are really abstract. We have a subject who's had her eyes kind of cut off. And then this almost looks like a repeat of, part of her mouth that's being blown up and really big. And there's some kind of strange type that's coming over, these parts of the images. So definitely a more artsy approach. This might be appropriate if your magazine is a little artsier, or if the subject matter for your article is, something about psychology or art. And then the text itself is actually reading on its side. And this wouldn't work for the whole article because it's a little bit annoying to have to turn the magazine around. So again, this is a pretty edgy approach, but for this little introduction paragraph, I think it works in this case. And then here's the article interior spread. Okay, love how this big pull quote is helping to break up this text. Again, imagine if this text came all the way down and filled up this space. Wouldn't it be nearly as interesting as putting in this big pull quote? And they've given a ton of white space to that pull quote, which is giving it a pretty strong place in the hierarchy. Then there's also some subheads here. Okay, the subheads are again helping break up this text. So instead of having just a bunch of long, pieces of text, a few subheads are helping break this up into sections. That's helping it feel a little bit more engaging. One small mistake that they've made here is that after a subhead, you don't actually need this first line indent. So technically speaking, this A should actually be right over here with the rest of the text. And same for all these other first paragraphs after the subhead. You of course need the indent, for a normal paragraph, but anytime you have a subhead, you can kind of start right on the edge, since we already know it's a new paragraph coming after a subhead. And then the left page is all dedicated to these images. Notice how they've created kind of an interesting rhythm to these two images by placing them in an interesting way. We have a little bit of a caption in the white space, and there's definitely a relationship between this image size and the white space for this pull quote. So a lot of interesting correlations. It's creating a really balanced layout overall. And then for their folio, keeping it really simple with numbers on the outside. It's important to note that the page number always wants to come to the outside. It doesn't want to, go on the right side here and then the right side here, because as you're flipping through the magazine, you're often thumbing through it with your, kind of the corner of the magazine. So the page number being on the inside isn't very helpful. The page number always wants to come to the outside, and then they've centered their running copy in the middle of the layout on both pages, with the name of the magazine and the tagline on one side, and then sort of a section heading in the middle on the right side. Here's an article introduction spread from the magazine Gentlewomen, which is a women's fashion magazine. And they've kept it really simple here with Kirsten Dunst, just featuring her name really big, but they've offset it with this interesting vertical striping pattern. Then there's a bit of a subtitle down below to give us a little bit more information about what the article is going to cover. And then an image of her, and notice how she's facing towards the title. That's, again, helping create some engagement between the text and the image. And then the interior spread has an image relationship between the vertical striping on the introduction spread and the image in this interior spread. So love to see that tie stylistically between the two spreads. And then some really simple text. This could use a little bit of breaking up. This is what happens when you really don't, incorporate any elements to break up the text. Again, it becomes a little intimidating, a little bit boring. It's helping that this image is really engaging, but I'd love to see some sort of pull quote here, or maybe some subheads to help break this up a little bit more.